Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another session, Tabnine Office Hours. Excited to be back here again this week. My name's Chris Good. I'm Director of Product Marketing here at Tabnine. I'll let Amaya introduce himself as well.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Ishmael, Head of Marketing at Tab9, and we are very excited to be here with you today. And today we're talking all about trust. And really, trust has become the most important concept in the realm of using AI for software development, especially as we enter the agentic era of AI for software development, where more and more developers are starting to use AI agents to help them execute specific steps inside the software development lifecycle, as well as delegating more and more tasks to agents. However, the question really remains, are the agents that are available today actually enterprise ready, and can you trust their output? Now, we've evolved quite a lot as an industry over the last couple of years, and we've gone from what were standard AI code assistants, which you can think of as simple code completion tools or simple chat tools inside the IDE, into agentic tools that are being used to autonomously modify code, run tasks, and maybe even make multi-file edits without keeping you really informed or in the loop. Now, one example of that is Copilot's agent mode that was announced in February of this year. Similarly, there's emerging IDEs like Cursor and Windsurf that incorporate AI agents to perform tasks across your code base. Now, the thing is that over the last 6 to 12 months, developers have really started to report various problems with these agentic tools. And the reason that they're running into those problems is multifactorial, but the approach that we've consistently taken at Tab9 is human in the loop design. So our agents are designed to augment your developers, augment your existing workflows, and not replace them. And furthermore, our agents are built into our Tab9 AI software development platform. So they leverage our enterprise context engine. And that means that they're actually aware of your existing code base, your non-code sources of information, like Jira, for example, and your rules and standards for code quality, which is very, very important in the enterprise context. Now, the other unique thing you'll see with Tab9's agents is that they don't overreach. And really, these other tools, the emerging concerns that have emerged around them are around security, they're around code quality, they're around cost efficiency, they're around automation overreach, a lack of transparency, and all of these factors together are combining to bring forth what Forrester has started to forecast is coming in 2026 as an incoming technical debt tsunami. So let's get started by diving into security risks. So coding agents can introduce vulnerabilities or unsafe code into your projects, and there's a lot of security concerns to keep in mind here. And really, there's two broad categories to it. One is the leakage of sensitive data, which you can encounter if you are deploying a SaaS-based tool that isn't Tab9, for example, or if you're deploying a tool that isn't completely contained in your environment and infrastructure, like our platform is through an on-prem deployment. But the other angle of it is insecure coding patterns. And you go back even as far back as 2021, a study on Copilot found that it generated code with security vulnerabilities 40% of the time. You go all the way up to 2024, another study on Copilot, Codium, and Amazon Code Whisperer, I believe, found that, hey, they still generate insecure code an average of 27% of the time. For Python, I believe that figure was mentioning specifically. Now, you have to be careful when you're using these agents lest you vibe code your way into setting out a welcome mat for would-be attackers. And the reason this really happens is, look, all these tools are trained on a huge public code corpora, and they really just regurgitate sensitive info, and they regurgitate the bad practices that might be present in that data. So GitGuardian does a lot of great studies. GitClear does a lot of great studies as well. But One of the warnings GitGuardian put out is that Copilot might suggest snippets that contain sensitive information. That could include keys to your data and machine resources. And now you actually go and push that out into production, and you get a situation where attackers could leverage those leaked secrets, gain unauthorized access into your systems. And because these LLM-based assistants that don't have a sophisticated context engine or a rule set in place to govern their output like we do, what you get from them is code that mirrors the average quality of their training data. So you'll find that they accidentally propagate outdated encryption standards. Maybe they use a weak approach to authentication, along with a variety of other insecure patterns, because those are just common in the code that they learn from. Now, Sneak, they do a great job on security research, and they themselves noted that when Copilot suggests code, it might inadvertently replicate existing security vulnerabilities and bad practices from its training set. If you're a senior experienced developer, you might recognize those right away. But if you're a more junior developer, you might accept those suggestions without realizing that a security flaw is being introduced. And when you go look at the studies on how junior developers use AI code assistants, you'll find that the more junior the developer, the more confident they are in the output of the AI and the less that they review it. So as you're rolling out a agentic AI tool for software development across all of your developers, which is happening more and more in the enterprise, Gartner's forecasting that 78% of all software engineers will use AI to assist their software development lifecycle by 2028, I believe. It's possible that if these agents aren't human in the loop and they aren't teaching your developers while they're using them, you could run into a situation very quickly where your junior devs are accidentally pushing a ton of code security vulnerabilities out. Now, of course, you have code review and static code analysis tools to tag and mitigate that, but code review is already a roadblock for a lot of organizations, and pushing more and more insecure code into code review is actually going to hamper your productivity from rolling out these tools, which is the entirely opposite outcome that you want when you're adopting them. Now, in December 2024, a company called Virtue AI did a security audit comparing multiple coding tools. It found that all of them occasionally produce insecure code. They fail to meet basic security standards and scenarios. And I think one really striking example from that was Cursor. So they accidentally, with Cursor, introduced arbitrary code execution vulnerability at CWE95. And what it was a partially implemented Python function that was meant to safely execute user-provided scripts. Cursor completed that by directly calling eval on the user input without any validation or sandboxing. Now, the outcome from this would be that an attacker could input something to execute arbitrary code. Now, any code assistant might do that, right? Because they're all using LLMs. But where the situation gets even worse is that Cursor actually helped craft an exploit. So the user typed in a comment hint, and then Cursor auto-completed the comment hint into a command that printed a sensitive system file using the insecure function, and then it actually went on to demonstrate the vulnerability that it just introduced. Now, okay, that happened. That's great. Well, it's not so great, actually. But so then the researchers prompted Cursor with an explicit security policy warning about this risk. Now, you'd expect that the tool would have said, oh, sorry, I did that. Let me fix it. It's not what happened. Cursor ignored the policy, and it still generated unsafe code. Now, incidents like this and many others that you can find out there if you go read on Twitter or Reddit, or if you like reading academic studies like I do, archive.x is a great source there. You'll find that this problem is pretty widespread. These tools today produce insecure suggestions, and furthermore, they overlook provided guidelines that your users are inputting, trying to enforce safety. Now, in contrast to that, Tabnine's code review and validation agent is actually aware of your standards and policies for security and follows them when you tell it to. Now, beyond code snippets that are insecure, an agent might also suggest shell commands or other actions that pose security hazards. So Copilot's agent, for example, it's designed to propose terminal commands, and it'll ask you to run them as part of completing a task. Now, I haven't found any specific stories yet there about that causing a problem, but you could probably extrapolate on your own that if you misapply this agentic functionality with an overeager user that's really excited by these tools, and of course we get it, right? These tools are very exciting. It's fun to vibe code things, although it's probably not appropriate to be vibe coding in an enterprise context. But a user that's gotten really excited about this might execute that command, and they might accidentally delete files, or they might expose system info without fully understanding the consequences. And really, this dives into the autonomous nature of these agents, right? You need to have control over your agents, and they need to take explicit developer intent and input into consideration. Otherwise, you get code quality issues. So the more complex your code, the worse these agents perform. And one day the technical debt bill will come due. Now, using any sort of AI will speed up your development process. That's whether you're using ChatGPT and copy and pasting your code into your ChatGPT application, which I did a case study with one of our customers recently, and he told us that prior to adopting Tabnine, he had a massive problem with shadow AI, where folks were copy and pasting their sensitive proprietary code directly into GPT's chat window on their browser or on their desktop app. Then when he blocked that with their security policies, they went on to bring in their own laptops to do it. When he restricted that, they went to their phones and started taking pictures of the code and putting it into there. So the reality of our situation today is whether or not you've adopted and implemented AI, your developers are going to use it. And you will, I don't want to put a threat in, I don't want to say you better do something, but it is better to adopt AI in a platform that lets you centralize, govern, monitor, and manage it. So you can give your developers a safe way and an effective way, importantly, to use these tools. Now, developers have flagged significant code quality problems with agentic tools, and these range from blatant errors to ill-suited or nonsensical suggestions. And I think one particular study on ChatGPT Code Whisperer, and Copilot in particular found that the code that these tools produce can have error rates as high as 52%. So just be careful what you delegate to agents and what agents you delegate to. Now, it's normal to think that as LLMs continue to improve over time, as their training data set continues to improve, as maybe they start rolling out things like mixture of expert approaches, things like autonomous fine-tuning approaches, for example, which we'll cover in another office hours. I have thoughts on that. Not a smart approach, in my opinion. But the fact of the matter is that no matter how much data you put into an LLM, it is always going to hallucinate. There's a great study from University of Singapore that came out last year in December that proposed a fundamental LLM hallucination theorem. All computable LLMs will hallucinate. They will hallucinate on an infinite number of problems. Fine-tuning and mixture of expert approaches, where you use LLMs to check the output of an LLM, which is kind of like asking someone that's hallucinating to check the output of someone else that's hallucinating. Probably not the smartest approach. That study found that those approaches were not effective for resolving the issues around code quality. And what the study found was that there's really only two effective ways to do this. It is guardrails and fences, which we provide through our code review rule set and our standards and policies component of our context engine. And the second way to mitigate it and actually produce a lift in code quality was through external real-time knowledge enhancement. Now, the study calls it external real-time knowledge enhancement, but what that really means is internal real-time knowledge enhancement, because of what you're doing inside our platform is connecting the LLMs and our agents to your code bases, to your local context, to your organizational rule sets and standards. And that is the context that's being retrieved in real time and continuously updated. And now with our context engine, which I can defensively say is the most sophisticated context engine on the market today. We found that we're getting an increase in code acceptance of output from our agents in chat to developers with the engine turned off that is 80% higher versus out the box LLM performance alone. And I would challenge you to find a LLM update that's come out these days that can deliver a 80% lift in code acceptance and usability and utility of output. I haven't seen it. Now, on Hacker News, there's great commentary about this as well. One developer there observed that LLMs make the easy stuff easier, but royally screw up the hard stuff. So in practice, what this means for you is if your code base or the problem you're working on deviates from a well-known pattern, the agentic AI you're using might choke, start hallucinating, and make your job considerably harder. Another comment I loved from Hacker News was that these agent tools work really well on trivial tasks. So things like building a rock, paper, scissors game, for example, or coding Snake. It's that game where you eat little dots as a snake. Work great for that. But as soon as your code base gets I'm quoting someone else here, a little bit weird, the model starts hallucinating and introducing mistakes. Now, this means that if there's code generated for edge cases or that the code needs to consider intricate business logic, what you're going to find is it often contains errors or simply doesn't work. And that's going to require your developer to spend more time debugging and rewriting it. And in effect, using an agent like this can become more of a hindrance than a help on non-trivial coding tasks. So in contrast to these tools, Tabnine is actually optimized for enterprise-grade engineering challenges. Now, users of Cursor and Windsurf have also reported that these agents sometimes give shallow and incomplete solutions that don't actually hold up. So there's some theories out there on Reddit as to why this happens. One that you might find interesting is I saw a Reddit discussion that shared a common belief that these tools are achieving token efficiency by narrowing their context. And that gets into another problem with these tools, which is it's token-based pricing. And are we buying enterprise software where there's predictable flat rate pricing, or are you buying software that's going to give token-based consumption to 10,000 of your developers and introduce a wild cost unpredictability? You decide what's appropriate for your organization. So because of the token-based pricing, the optimization that some of these tools do to reduce token consumption is through not considering the full context of the project. And what that causes them to happen is suggest code that is syntactically correct, which any LLM will generally do, but will miss the mark in terms of how it works in the broader context of your larger system. Now, the same person that wrote about this on Reddit also compared these tools to other solutions, which are not Tabnine. There's two notable ones they mentioned, Klein and Rue. And these tools are unique in that they use more context and they catch more issues, but they also come with a much, much higher token cost. So if you're trying to now balance out cost versus quality, well, that's a trade-off we think that you shouldn't have to make, which is why Tabnine is a flat rate price for our on-prem deployments and our VPC deployment and our SaaS deployment, $39 per user per month. Use as much of the LLM as you like. And you might wonder, how is it that we're actually able to offer this, especially given that, one, we haven't raised an insane amount of money like some of these other tools on the market? Where are we just eating the cost for it? And the answer is no. The takeaway really here is that if you actually have a sophisticated context engine and do retrieval properly, you don't need to make as many queries to the LLM. And if you have a human in the loop design principle for your agents, which recognizes and values the expertise of your developers, they direct it and you don't get stuck in infinite loops where the LLM and agent is just looping over and over on itself, burning through your tokens, trying to solve a problem that your developer could have directed it to solve with a couple of prompts or a couple of words and phrases had the tool actually kept them informed.
You know, I did actually run into that my first time this past week. I finally caught wind of what it's like to get stuck in one of those loops, right? It was something as simple as Cursor was recommending me a specific font library that I was having trouble importing, explicitly said, don't use this library, throw inner out, let's use something else that's similar. And then I ended up burning through a couple million credits, got a notification that said Cursor's reran this 10 times over, even with explicitly telling it, don't use this font file or font style. It got in this loop and couldn't get itself out of it, right? So I now have a better understanding of the frustration when we talk to these folks and they express that, right? Of I'm running out of credits like crazy. I'm getting stuck in these stupid loops. Of course, we have an idea of what it's like, but to experience it firsthand, definitely unsettling and frustrating.
Yeah, I can imagine. I recall, I think 2 or 3 months ago, office hours, there's a gentleman, one of our customers, a large financial services institution that joined. He shared his experience, I believe, evaluating windsurf, I believe it was. And what he shared was that he went and had it run a task for him. It went and made changes to about 30 or 40 different files. And then afterwards, his program wasn't working anymore. And he told us that he actually spent more time going back and trying to figure out what it did and trying to figure out how to fix it than he would have if he had just manually written the entire thing himself. And that's one of the reasons he chose Tabnine. So now, one of the big differences you are going to see with us, though, is that our agents are not as autonomous, and we've intentionally not built autonomy into them to the same degree that you'll find in these other tools. And really, the fundamental reason for that is before you build autonomy, you have to build trust. And trust can only happen if your agents are actually contextually aware. So it really has to have a robust foundation of context, governance, and control around it. Furthermore, it has to check in with the developer frequently and keep the developer involved in the decision-making process, as well as keep the developer the person that is directing and deciding when and where to delegate and when and where to consume what the agentic tool is delivering. And, when we were at GTC, we were talking to someone at the booth that was using Cursor, and we shared that, hey, it's really important that it checks in and slows down. And she actually shared with us, oh, they actually just backtracked last week on their functionality there to make it more human in the loop. So don't rush to automate. Slow and steady is the approach to take with rolling out these tools. You want to measure the performance impact that they're having, and we'll do another office hours on how to set up and think through a sophisticated measurement mechanism and process for understanding and identifying the impact of these tools on your SDLC, which of course gets into the whole can of worms on measuring developer productivity. But thankfully, there are quite a lot of good frameworks out there, and we have a good thought process or approach called AI assisted productivity that builds upon existing things like DORA and other frameworks for measuring it. And we'll provide you guys with some specific things to look for and start to measure for using AI. Now, let's go talk about token consumption and efficiencies. So, for example, Cursor offers a pro plan that has a fixed number of fast requests, which I believe is around 500 a month. And these count against your quota regardless of response length. Now, on Hacker News, people have experienced frustration with it, where they've said that, for example, getting a one-line code suggestion costs the same as refactoring an entire file. So it can be pretty confusing. It's pretty cloudy exactly how these token costs are calculated. And you can quickly run into a situation where you've accidentally burned through your monthly requests and now need to incur additional costs. And you can also run into things like throttling the response, getting forced into a pay-as-you-go model. And really, when you have these tools and you want your developers to use and adopt them, you don't, at least I wouldn't want to give my developers a tool that makes them feel like they have to ration their AI queries or just use the AI for very trivial matters for fear of burning through their quota too quickly. Now, Windsurf initially came out with a generous token allowance, but you go read on Reddit or Twitter and you'll find that a lot of folks are speaking about how real usage quickly exhausts it. Now, one Reddit user in particular observed that the consumption of tokens and flow tokens is exaggerated, and she shared that the application has consistent errors and great difficulty in reading the code. And another user noted that a credit on Windsurf only lasted for 3 to 5 days of coding. But that same amount of credit consumption, when he tried it with a different tool like Klein or Rue, was used up in an hour. So just adding more credence to the theory floating around that these tools are creating token efficiencies by limiting context. Now, there's also issues around pricing changes and feature limitations that have caused frustrations in the dev community. And really, I think what you have to decide on your own is, how do you want to roll out AI? And if you're rolling out AI to a lot of your engineers, do you constantly want to face scrutiny from senior management on rising costs? Do you constantly want to have to defend asking for more budget in order to use the tools? Perhaps you do, perhaps you don't. Perhaps you're really excited by the full autonomous capabilities and you believe in that vision, and you believe that autonomous agents are actually effective right now from these offerings. And if you do, there's solutions out there for you. But if you don't, and you'd like to bring everything in-house, you'd like it to be predictably priced, you'd like the quality to be high, you'd like your developers to be informed and in control of the process, and you'd like to be able to measure it accurately, we can offer you that. And furthermore, if you want to deploy on-prem with us, the emergence of powerful open source models is something that is occurring today, and they continue to get better and better. Like Llama and Quen are fantastic models. You go and deploy those on-prem, and now you have taken model consumption completely out of the picture. And many of our enterprise customers do that. So just deploy Tabnine's entire platform on your own infrastructure along with a performant on-prem model. Now you've reduced your LLM costs to what is effectively a commodity price. And historically, I always assumed that this would really only be meaningful to massive development teams, but that is typically who chooses to deploy on-prem with us. Just 2 weeks ago, we actually had a team of 10 engineers decide to go for an on-prem deployment, because not only from the pricing standpoint did they think it was going to be more efficient, but from the code quality, code privacy, and security standpoint, an on-prem deployment is vastly superior. Now, agents that overreach, that introduces a loss of control and creates a risk of damage. So when you have agents refactoring multiple lines without approval, if you have cursors apply functionality, changing unrelated parts of the code, you don't have a undo functionality, there's a high risk for accidental damage from the use of these tools. Now, users have reported that agents sometimes make changes that go beyond the scope of the request. So in the Copilot agent beta, for example, a particularly venomous quote from a tester was that the feature goes full throttle into butchering your code if left unchecked. Now, I'm sure it'll improve over time, and betas are betas. But the important thing to take away from that is that before you delegate something out to a tool, be careful that the tool you're using isn't going to overreach, and be careful that you're not giving a tool a license to refactor broadly in your code base that should really only be in the hands of your engineers. Now, of course, with pushing your code and managing your stages and your CI/CD pipeline, that will help mitigate that. But a license to refactors should be something that is firmly in the hands of your developer. Now, the other issue with some of these tools is a lack of interruptibility. So once an agent starts executing a plan, controlling its actions can be difficult. It can just go ahead and charge through multiple steps. You might find along the way that, oh, hey, no, stop doing that. But it's not listening. And you need to really be able to do mid-course correction. So what you'll find with Tabnine's tooling is, because it's checking in with you and asking for permission to progress to the next step, and leaving the control of actually deciding to apply the change in your hands. We have an apply button as well, obviously. However, the apply button requires you to click it and then click again to accept the diff in the code. And you have to read through the explanation of what it suggested before you even get to the code that it's suggesting. So it's a good forcing function. We intentionally are slowing down your developers' usage of AI by a matter of a couple of seconds or a minute in order to save you on the back end hours potentially of debugging and rework time.
Just to jump in real quick, I think that's the hallmark of what makes Tabnine a really good tool, or any what makes any tool a good tool is one that enhances your capabilities without undermining your autonomy. And that's what we're aiming to do here.
So really this goes into a lack of developer control or transparency. So developers can't trust what they can't see or understand. So you can't have agents that are making changes with no explanation, no traceability, no action history, no rationale. Now, with Tabnine, we provide full audit trails, we provide explanations for the suggestions we're making, and we provide references, which congratulations to Copilot. I just saw yesterday they started providing references as well. Now, that trust is built through visibility, right? So here's a kind of a cool duck. I'm a bit proud of the AI generated images I've been creating with Leonardo. I hope you enjoy them as much as I do. And sometimes, man, I wish I was as cool as that duck with the sunglasses on. I digress. So early on, Copilot Agent and Cursor both lacked undo and history features. They've implemented those now. And really the issue is that without clear mapping of which AI response caused which code changes, it's hard to trace back and understand an agent's actions. And more importantly, the overreach here is when an agent edits many files at once, it's much harder for your developers to stay in control. And many developers really what they want is a simpler step-by-step change logger conversation. So think of an AI agent for each one of your developers as like a junior developer or like an intern that's come in. Now, if you told that person to go and execute a task and you were kind of doing pair programming with them, they would tell you, hey, I think I'm going to do this. And you'd say, okay, great. Yeah, that makes sense. Go ahead and do it. Oh, that didn't work. I'm doing this because I looked at this, right? And really that comes down to that idea of trust. Now you can trust a human developer because you trust their human judgment, they communicate with you, and you understand how they think. Now, if you want to trust an AI agent that you want to delegate work to that you would previously perhaps delegate it to a human developer to do, they need to communicate with you on that level as well. And just as when you're working with a new engineer, that trust is built up over time. With an agent, that trust has to be built up over time. And that's what we deliver for you today. Now, one of the ways we do that is explanation of the decisions and asking for permission before making changes. And another way we do that is through control and privacy considerations. So, for example, you can deploy our entire platform on-prem, you can air gap it. Other solutions send code to the cloud by default. And what's unique also about our SaaS and VPC deployments is that we don't store or retain your data for any time at all. We use ephemeral processing. In contrast to that, Copilot and some of these other tools actually do retain your data for some period of time. And if your organization has strict policies around that, that's a transparency and control issue. You may not be comfortable with a cloud service retaining your data for some unknown period of time, even if they claim that they're not doing anything with it, which I'm not saying that they are. But the question remains, how much trust do you want to place in external vendors, and how much security do you actually really need to have to feel confident exposing your proprietary IP and your sensitive code to these tools' context engines? So with us, you can do that safely, securely, regardless of what deployment modality you're choosing. That's one of the reasons we do very well in Europe, by the way. The entire platform was built with a core foundation of data privacy and security in mind. That's also why we do very well with highly regulated and privacy conscious industries. For example, Safran Aerospace and Defense uses us, along with GE Healthcare, AstraZeneca, and Tesco as well, which you might be surprised to learn a supermarket chain is actually very sophisticated in their data privacy and security posture. Now, let's talk about the impact on technical debt. Forrester, as I stated earlier, is forecasting a tsunami of tech debt. You've started to kind of understand the picture of how fast code can lead to future rework. You've started to understand how agentic AI can pile on suboptimal code or duplicate logic. I think you can probably start to draw out considerations on how that can be harmful in legacy code bases or high debt code bases, which are common in enterprise environments. And perhaps if that's what you're dealing with, Tabnine is going to be a great fit for you because we're focused on supporting sustainable engineering that's appropriate for mature enterprise engineering teams, not vibe coding for hobbyist developers or for non-code developers or what people call citizen developers. Now, accelerating code without considering the maintainability of that code can utterly balloon the support cost of your applications. So the more AI generated code that you're adding in without thinking, without reviewing it, without considering it, the more your future engineers are going to pay the price in debugging and upkeep. And the way we solve that at Tabnine is through our code review agent. Now, this is not a linter. This is not a static code analysis tool. Think about the code review agent as an agent that propagates your best developers' approaches to software development, that knowledge across the organization, and then fixes, flags, and resolves issues in your code prior to even getting into the pull request. So you can use the code review agent in the IDE. That's available through Terminal today, coming into chat very, very soon here as well. And you can use the code review agent directly in the pull request on GitHub PRs, for example. Now, the rule set that the code review agent looks at is going to be around things like architecture, maintainability, performance, security, readability, so on and so forth. So sophisticated categories of rules that require thinking. And what's unique about it is you can create thousands of rules if you want. It comes pre-built with a couple thousand rules in it already that follow best practices. You can have your expert engineers input rules with natural language. You can have us point it at your PRs or your golden repository, which is a repo that has your organization's best code to extract rules that then you can review and decide whether or not you want included. You can set the rules by team, by user, by organization. You can organize them by language and library as well. And regardless of however many rules you put in, when you invoke the code review agent, it's going to read every single line of code. It is going to check every single rule against that line. And then once it's done doing that, it's going to give you a report. And that report is going to tell you, hey, I found this many issues. They have this level of severity. And then it's going to list out the issues one by one. It's going to tell you, hey, this is where I found the issue. This is what it was. This is why it did not follow the rule. Here is the fix that I'm suggesting to bring it into compliance. And at that point, it's over to your engineer to either accept that change or to go and work with the AI some more to implement and solve for that solution. And really, this solves the issue of AI-generated debt and security vulnerability and architectural issues and maintainability challenges prior to the code even getting into code review. And in addition to that, it's training your engineers on how to write better code because it's telling them and explaining to them what they did wrong and why it does not fit with your policies.
So there is just,
go ahead.
I would say one quick bit. I know there's been talk, right? Is AI, are AI code assistants sort of promoting illiteracy with junior developers? And I can't, maybe you'll remember the specific study, right? But they gave a bunch of junior developers a tool like this, let them use it for a month or so, then took the tool away. These junior devs, when using something proper like Tabnine, they learned the language, they learned the code base, they were exponentially better off and more productive and accurate and better at their work after having used the tool to learn and onboard, and it ultimately became better developers. So I think this idea of illiteracy should be thrown out. I think like anything, if you use too much of it, it can be bad, like vibe coding, right? But a tool like Tabnine that's in the loop, that's keeping you informed, that you're supposed to review and make decisions, it's ultimately going to be a great learning experience for any dev.
Yeah, that study was, I believe, done by McKinsey. It was, I think, done in 2022 or 2023, and it actually looked at Copilot. So Microsoft sponsored that study, great study by them. And what they did with it was they had a control group and a test group. They gave them the same challenges. They were the same level of kind of engineering experience, if you will, junior developers typically. And now, clearly, the devs were more productive. They're using the AI code assistant. Then they took away the code assistant from the control group and they did more testing on them. And they found that the devs were actually better than they were prior to using AI after using it. Now, this is pre-vibe coding days, right? So does that still hold up if you aren't actually reviewing and being as involved with it anymore? That remains to be seen. However, with a tool like Tabnine, because it's human in the loop and it explains, and you have to direct it and you have to accept the change and understand what it's doing prior to accepting the change. Excuse me, I'm rambling a bit here. I think with us, you're going to see that your developers will continue to get better over time. And more importantly, if they do go off and use our agentic capabilities to implement a bunch of changes, you've got the code review agent to come and catch the fixes on the back end prior to them getting over to your PR. And if they don't catch it prior to the PR, you've got it in the PR to help you. But really what it's enabling you to do is do code review the way code review is meant to be. Code review is not meant to be this nitpicky linting exercise. It's not meant to be a moment of tension where a developer is scared to know or see what the senior engineer is going to respond with. And it's not meant to be a massive load on the senior engineer to have to go and review all of this code with a 24-hour SLA, which is pretty common. Now you take off some of that pressure and you actually have a chance now for your senior engineers to do mentorship and teach and educate your junior engineers during code review and make them better software developers. That's something that excites me. Now, this is what Tabnine offers you. Look, any agent can write code, but ours earn your developers' trust. So our agents are human in the loop. You have to review every suggestion. The entire platform is secure, compliant, and private by design. I know I haven't spoken much about compliance, but the way that works is we have a code attribution functionality. Turn that thing on. It checks every line of the code that the AI is outputting, checks it against publicly visible sources. It tells you, hey, this code came from here, and it has this license associated with it. Now, what many of our customers also like to do is create a rule that says, hey, any code that has a GPL license associated with it, suppress that. So now, as you're using agentic AI, and as we're developing more and more autonomous capabilities into our existing SDLC agents, you can be confident that you're not accidentally also introducing IP liability into your applications, which is something your CISO will certainly love. Now, of course, the entire platform is contextual. It understands your code base, your repositories, your non-code sources, your docs. It understands your rules for code quality. It follows your regulations for privacy. It uses the models that you've approved for internal usage, the models that you've decided how you want to connect into them. For example, we have endpoints that we can give you. And if your data privacy is a high concern and you're not open to doing an on-prem deployment, we recommend using the Anthropic model family because that's served through Amazon Bedrock, which has an ironclad data privacy guarantee with it. Now, you can also get your own API endpoints if you want to host them in your own virtual private cloud and connect that internally. And of course, if you're deployed on-prem, you can use any model you like that's also deployed on-prem, and you can regulate that usage. Now, the last bit is that Tabnine is integrated. So it works with your tools, not against them. And one of our commitments to you there is we are not creating our own custom IDE. Your developers will never have to change out of the IDEs they know, love, and use already. All of our agentic capabilities that we're continuing to enhance and add more autonomy to will be delivered right inside the IDEs you know, love, and use. We also don't lock you into any sort of technology. Use any repository you want. Use any Git-based repo, GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket, Apache, Tomcat, what have you. Connect as many of them as you want as well. think one of our customers has connected 10,000 repositories. You may have even more repositories than that. And what I recommend our customers do is connect repositories with good code in them, right? Because that's the context you want your AI to have. And then finally, we're building a broad set of integrations into more and more of your dev tool stack. We already have an integration with Jira. Chris will show you our Jira to code agent and validation agent. It's a fantastic capability. If you're measuring things like ticket and issue resolution time, this will definitely help you accelerate that. And then finally, of course, you're not locked into any model. So models are going to continue to get better. Of course, you are aware of the fundamental issue with LLMs as a technology. That will always be in place, but the LLMs will continue to get better in their performance. And with us, you're not locked into any model. You're not locked into any model provider. You're not locked into any model deployment mechanism either. And furthermore, our on-prem customers have access to a capability we call architectural freedom. Now, I haven't talked about fine-tuning at all because 99% of the time, fine-tuning is not the right decision for you to make. It's not going to produce the results that you want in code quality. Retrieval augmented generation and our context engine are definitely what you want to go with. However, for some small subsets of customers, they have engineers that are writing code in languages like System Verilog or VHDL. Now, what we recommend them to do is, assuming you have enough high quality code, first of all, in that language, and that you have internal resources that can execute fine tuning for you, that includes a lot of headcount for data labeling, analysis, testing, as well as hardware requirements. And assuming as well that you have a robust mechanism for testing the quality of the output. And then also assuming that you've established a baseline of performance with those engineers writing Verilog using a vanilla LLM plus Tabnine. So you're aware of how good the tool performs currently. Assuming that's all in place, and now assuming on top of that you run your fine-tuning successfully, you don't have catastrophic forgetting, and it passes all of your internal benchmarks like human eval, etc. Well, from there, you can go and plug that model into the Tabnine platform on-prem and offer it to those engineers, and you can leverage all of our agentic capabilities and context engine on top of it. So really the only use case and time I recommend fine-tuning is specifically for increasing the underlying data set within an open source model on a specific specialized language, assuming all of those factors are in place and you're able to execute that. So if you want to go off and do that science project on your own and you're able to do it successfully, with us, you have the architectural freedom to connect that in and turn your innovation into business impact rapidly with our solution. So AI software development platform built for mature enterprise engineering teams. On-prem, air-gapped, or cloud deployments, use any LLM you like, your model on your infrastructure as well. Seamless integration with your IDEs, your source code management systems, your CI/CD pipeline, and agents that generate and validate code at every step of the SDLC. So without further ado, let me hand it off to Chris, and let's take a look at some of the exciting things you can do with Tabnine. But before I get there, let me make sure I answer any questions that popped up in the chat here. Hello to you as well, Alessandro. Hi, Jabril. Hi, Fee. And hello, anonymous LinkedIn user. All right, question from Heiko. How do you on Tabnine take care of the problems of LLMs that you've described? Great question. I think I may have answered that already, but it is through our enterprise context engine, through human in the loop AI agents, and through our governance. So code review rule sets, architecture and maintainability, security, etc. Your standards, your understanding of code quality, that's how we fix it. Now, Heiko, love the questions. Please keep them coming. Are there programming languages that are better supported by Tabnine than others? Great question. So because you can use any of the third-party LLMs you like, almost every single LLM on the market today has broad coverage for over 600 languages, libraries, and frameworks. So you're very, very well covered in programming languages. I'm using Elixir and Phoenix Live View. Not familiar with those, but download Tabnine, try Claude, and try typing that into chat, and you'll find out very, very quickly if it supports it or not. So far, I have yet to find a language where it couldn't help. Oh, Richard, I like Tabnine, but the autocomplete is a horrible experience. If it had the same experience as Codium Supercomplete, then it would be an ace. Yeah, no, you're right. Tabnine code completions are not that great, but really code completions aren't really that exciting anyways. So the code completions use the Tabnine protected model. And what that model is it has exclusively been trained on permissively licensed open source code. And what that means is that its training corpus of data is very, very small. And that is a trade-off with model performance there. But where the code completions are not as powerful as some of the other alternatives out there. It's just that all of our chat and agent capabilities are really what is driving productivity, we found. But it's certainly something we're aware of and working on. Thank you for raising that, Connor. I think that is what is one of the biggest differentials, is that Tabnine does not store data where others do. Is this correct? That is correct. Even when you're on Tabnine SaaS, we do not store, retain, train, or share your data. I think it's HIPAA compliant as well as SOC and ISO certified. Tabnine is SOC and ISO certified, and you can deploy the entire solution on-prem air-gapped, which takes care of pretty much 100% of your compliance requirements. This is also why we're able to be used by the government, both in abroad and domestically, because of that on-prem air-gapped deployment option. Ed, will there be a video of this at the end of the webcast? Yes, there will. It automatically gets posted to our YouTube channel. That's Tabnine AI on YouTube, and it will be posted here directly on LinkedIn as well that you can watch. I recommend watching it on our YouTube channel. What models are you using? A lot of them, right? So I think, as Chris will show you, there's maybe like 8 different models that are offered that you can switch between. Really, it's wide open, right? You have our architectural freedom capability, use any model that you'd like. And I think that is it for questions. So let's go ahead and move on into the demo.
All righty. Let's see here. Okie dokie. All right, should have this up on the screen. I believe we do. So let's get on with the show. Okay. For starters, let's go over the Tabnine UI that folks will interact with, right? And we'll talk about sort of each of the agents and Tabnine form factors, if you will, that you're going to find along the way. So starting in the IDE, in this case, I'm in VS Code, but as Amaya said earlier, we support the entire JetBrains family. We support Visual Studio. We support NeoVim, Eclipse, right? Any popular major IDE where your devs are already coding, we're in there. In this case, I'm in VS Code. And when you have Tabnine downloaded, you're going to see this little icon here on the left-hand side, right? Clicking that is going to open up Tabnine AI Chat. Now, starting at the, I will start at the bottom here. We have an area for natural language, everyday conversation, querying, right? You can type in prompts and queries to get back suggestions and answers. Now, you can use @mentions, right? @mentions will allow you to specifically reference, let's say, different classes or methods or whole files. You can also determine your scope from this command or this prompt bar, if you will, section of AI chat, right? So this is a new feature for Tabnine. This is our context selection, right? So you can determine on a prompt by prompt or conversation by conversation basis the scope for your current convo, right? So you can have current file, workspace, code base. You can even add terminal as context. You can even go in and add specific repositories, folders within those repositories, and even get as granular as specifying specific files, referencing specific files within your query. Now, next to that, within this querying section, you're going to find this little backslash. Now, if you're a longtime Tabnine user, you'll know that we used to have our agents right here within our chat. They've now moved below to this dropdown. So you're going to see a handful of local ones out of the box that are going to be, come standard with Tabnine. Your explain, your test, your document code, your fix code, and your code explorer. Now, you also in Tabnine have the ability to personalize it for each developer or for each team, right? So you can create custom commands. You can even share those custom commands. And custom commands are very similar to your sort of a mini agentic flows that you can create based off of things that you find yourself prompt engineering, let's say, on a daily basis. Just a way to speed up your flow and keep you being more productive. Now, next to that, you're going to have the ability to add images as context, right? So think ER diagrams. You can turn those into Postgres schema. You can go, let's say, bug hunting. Your marketing team just sent you a image of something that's broken on your website, right? A component that's not working. You can attach that image in here into your prompt and use it to find that specific block of code and ultimately then fix the error. You can also then use our Jira agent from this prompt bar. Now, I'll get into this here very, very shortly, but clicking this Jira button is going to populate a dropdown, and that dropdown will have your Jira tickets that are specific to your user. For some reason, I'm getting a spinning wheel here, so I might just, for the sake of this demo, restart this early. Okay, so anywho, let me get this guy to load. Okay, perfect. So you also then have your Jira ticket, right? That's where you can implement and validate specific Jira tickets, as Amaya was talking about earlier. So next to chat, or right below chat, actually, you have our switchable models dropdown. So when we were talking about which models are available, that's up to the administrator, right? Each administrator is in control of which models are available to the developers within their organization, the Tabnine users. Now, for my specific environment, I've allowed these models to be allowed here. But for the sake of this demo, I'm going to be going with Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Now, to the right of our chat, you're going to see our test agent, right? Now, this is where you can generate comprehensive test plans for your code, either from scratch or using pre-existing test plans as context. And we'll get into that later within the demo. We'll show exactly how to do that. Now, one area we're just going to cover here in the beginnings is our settings section. Now, this is located within the Tabnine AI chat, but there's a lot of really, really cool stuff here. And I'll talk more about this as we work through the demo, but just to give you an overview. For starters, this is where you connect to Jira. It is a 2-click, 30-second process. If you've ever integrated any sort of application before or done one of these handshakes, you know how to do it. It's very simple. Below that, you're going to have a response length, right? You can customize your response length for your individual self in Tabnine, right? So comprehensive, great for folks that are onboarding into a project, want more information, the why, the what, the how of what Tabnine's recommending. Concise is awesome for your senior devs who just want quick to the point answers, right? Just code suggestions and minimal text. Now, custom behaviors, very, very, very powerful. This is, I like to say this is something that fundamentally changes the way that each developer can use Tabnine, right? So this is where you get to specify at a high level how Tabnine is going to interact with you. Now you can use it to localize Tabnine. Let's say you are, you speak German. German is your first language. You can say, hey, answer in German or respond in Chinese. You can even do non-English characters. Let's say, answer in Marathi, for example, and Tabnine will localize and provide answers in that language. But that's just one piece of it, right? You can also, let's say, add logging, entry, and exit statements. We can follow dry and solid principles. We're also going to be following test-driven development, right? So you'll see that when it does provide suggestions, it's also going to provide tests for those first. So it's a way to really hone in and refine your individual experience with Tabnine. Below that, you're able to create custom commands. And we'll talk more about this at the end, right? But it's a way to create commands or mini agents, if you will, that take away the heavy lifting of the prompt engineering you found yourself doing on a day-to-day basis, right? So for example, being able to find and fix Java dependencies. It's going to scan my POM file for updates and then help me update it, right? So let's go into the actual project itself, right? The code. So when you're working with Tabnine, you're going to see here, or first, let me get ahead of myself. We're going to start with our auto completion since we've talked about that previously here in the session. So when you're typing in Tabnine, let's see here. Oh, that's not it's ending my useful info here because I already have enough roles. But you'll see when it's showing that gray text, right? If we want to add one more rule here, this gray text that's showing up here in the bottom, that's Tabnine's auto completions, right? So it's going to recognize your intent. In this case, if I'm creating new rules for this security password generator, it's going to recognize that, right? And it's going to add another line here that's adding, unfortunately, rule 17. It's a strict program. But whether you're creating documentation, you're adding new code, you're writing tests, right? Tabnine's automatically going to recognize that intent and provide auto completions that are going to help you do it faster, right? So at the top, though, of each block of code, moving forward, you're going to see the code lens, right? So if we remember these agents we saw in here, very similar, but a more, in developer flow way of accessing them, right? So you can edit, you can test, you can explain, and you can document specific blocks of code. And now the last piece we're going to talk about is our quick commands palette. So this is initialized by Command I on a MacBook. For those of you JetBrains users, I do know that might be an issue with current key bindings, but do not worry, you can remap keys, so there's nothing to worry about there. But hitting Command I is going to populate this or open up this dropdown. Now, at the top, you can use everyday natural language to type in queries or prompts and get responses and suggestions back. You can also use quick commands, right? So our fix code, document code, explain code, and code explorer agents are accessible from here as well. You can determine your scope. You can reference specific code snippets. And then you can also determine which model is being used for this specific action. So chat, auto completions, code lens, quick command dropdown, all helping you achieve similar things, but chat being sort of the most out of developer flow while still being in it, and auto completions being the most in the developer flow, or quick commands being the most in the developer flow. You don't have to ever leave your hands off the keyboard to achieve that same functionality, right? So it's just personal preference. It's flexibility. It's about meeting you where you're comfortable, how you like to work. So we went through sort of an overview. Let's continue on. Let's start talking about planning, right? Onboarding into a new project, right? That's usually the first stage for a software dev, right? And we're going to go through each stage of the SDLC here, starting in this case with plan. So for me, it's very, very important to have a really good understanding of the program I'm working in, right? Before I start working. How am I supposed to build if I don't know what I'm building, right? So what we're going to do here is we'll go over to this application here. And let's run our Code Explorer agent. Now, Code Explorer agent is a built-in quick action. Whoops, let's just exit out of these. It is a built-in quick action that is that users can invoke when starting a new conversation or from an empty state, right? Using Code Explorer, Tabnine Chat's going to return this high-level summary of what the project is, right? It's going to talk about the dependencies it uses, what exactly the purpose is. It'll give some key elements, runnable scripts, overall structure. It's also going to tell me how I'm going to begin contributing, right? Additionally, it's also going to show me a handful of follow-up questions, right? That's going to allow me to maybe dive a little bit deeper into areas that I'm working on, right? So what is maybe the primary focus of this application, specifically within the fraud detection dashboard? Okay, and here's more about what it does. There's transaction monitoring, there's risk assessments, there's alert management, right? Now, what we can do is, let's say we've found something that we want to learn more about. Okay, perfect. We have this dashboard component. We can use the code explain, right? So what explain's going to do is explore, think project wide, explain, max context it has is one file, but it's really used when you want to explain specific blocks of code, right? So now it's going to explain even in more depth, more granularly, exactly what this component is doing. Okay, now we have a good understanding of what we're working with here, right? We understand this is a fraud detection dashboard. We understand what it's doing and sort of the key components and structure and how it works, so we can continue to move forward. So the next step here is going to be to create, right? We're going to implement a Jira ticket. Now, here is our Jira board, and let me just get out of this area. Okay, so something to take note of here. 60 to-do tickets, 7 ready for dev, 2 in progress, so on and so forth, right? There's a lot of tickets here, and I'm integrated into Jira. Now, specific to me, there's 16. Okay, that's a lot of tickets. Now, whenever I go here in my dropdown, whoops, let me see here. Ah, perfect. Well, I'm not connected, but we can connect together live. Oh, fantastic. Okay. Oh, we love a live demo. Let me see if there is another one that might accept. This is a good demo. You can see how easy it is to integrate into Jira. Sweet. Okay. Close this tab. Let's return. All right. So we are going to. Perfect. Now we're back in here. So you're only going to see 5 tickets, right? Why is that? Well, tab 9's only going to show the tickets that are associated to my account, that are assigned to me as my individual user in Jira. But it's also only going to show the ones that have been active or have had changes made to them within the last 30 days, right? So you're not going to have this onslaught of tickets here, making it really difficult. But what we're going to do here is we're going to do a brand redesign V3, right? And all we do is say implement this ticket. And what tab 9 is going to do, it's going to use that acceptance criteria, that ticket description, and it's going to implement those changes, right? So, okay, we're going to update the sidebar component. That's great. Perfect. It's also going to validate this for me too. To complete this ticket, you should fully do so-and-so. Okay. Awesome. And let's check the references here as well. Okay, so dashboard and global CSS. So it's using my entire workspace and how I've historically preferred a style, right? Without me having to explicitly specify that, right? So we talked about it earlier, but we do have an apply button. It is incredibly simple. All you do is hit apply. You get to review the change, like it, hit accept. There we go. It's added in, right? And we'll do the same thing with the top bar. We're going to hit apply. It's going to add those in. We're going to hit accept. Great. Now we just need to make sure that we've implemented this correctly, right? So we're going to hit this. We're going to do the Jira implementation or validation, right? So we'll hit that drop down again. We're going to choose our same ticket, and we're going to say validate this ticket. Awesome. Ensure let's see. To fully validate this, we should use a contrast checker tool. Okay, so something I explicitly defined in my ticket, and I can show you that here. Whoops. So I want to verify that they're consistent, that they maintain readability, and that the test the changes across different browsers, right? This is human testing, right? Something that can't be done necessarily at this point by Tabnine. So it's important to acknowledge the fact that it's not just blindly saying, "Oh yeah, you've implemented it. It's all good to go. Thumbs up." It's saying, "Hold on a second. We just need to make sure that there are some extra things that you need to go check because they're going to require that human validation, right?" And it's going to tell you specifically what those are, how to do it, and also provide some additional observations, right? And this is comprehensive, so you are seeing a lot here, but I think it really speaks to the level of clarity and accuracy and completeness of the Tabnine responses, right? So we validated that this is at least partially correct. What we're going to do here is now we're going to test, right? We'll move on to the testing agent per se. So what we're going to do is let's actually jump back here into our Java platform. I think this one's going to have some better examples. And we're going to open up our test agent. Now, what you're able to do is generate comprehensive test plans for your code, right? So you'll hit generate test plan. It's going to prompt you to select your code. In this case, we are going to do the entire generator.java file. We're going to hit OK. Now, if you had a test file, you would hit browse and it would show up from this dropdown. I do have a password test one, but we're not going to be using that one right now. So we're going to say I don't have one, right? And it's going to create a new one for us. We'll just leave this as is for right now. Awesome. Now, step one is it's going to be creating sort of this framework, right? Starting, it's gonna generate this test plan, but it's also going to start with a file with a template as well, right? So it's starting the groundwork for you. And then you'll see here in our left-hand side, it's going to provide a bunch of suggested tests that are, easily read with a short English description here. Now, these are all keyword suggested tests, right? So any of these can be modified or refined to your liking, right? So for starters, let's add a few in, right? So clicking on this specific test is going to initialize the generation of it. All we do, we'll click apply, and that will insert it into our test exactly where it should be. Hit accept. Great, good stuff. Let's throw this one in here as well. Great, great. Looks good to me. Now, should display all 16 password security tips when option 3. It does make sense. That's what we should do. But let's say that's not what we wanted to do, right? Let's say we only wanted to show 15, right? The last one isn't necessarily important to us. So we can say change to only show, let's say, the first 10 rules. All of these, again, are suggestions, right? Meaning that you can refine, you can polish, you can change whatever you would like, and then ultimately add it in within your test file, right? Only first 10 here now. It's exactly what we wanted. We're going to click apply. Boom. Looks good. Let's accept those changes. Perfect. Okay. So we've built all of this testing now, right? We have this big test file, but I don't know if I exactly remember what they all do, right? Or I did it yesterday and I'm back on today and I'm having a hard time remembering. Or heck, someone on my team needs to go in and run this test file. How are they supposed to know, right? We can run our documentation agent. And I'll show you sort of 3 different ways to do it on these 3 different blocks of code. So for starters, we can document code from our code lens, right? It's going to process this request and it's going to add a block of code at the top. We'll accept that. We can also do our quick commands dropdown, right? So command I, document code, going to process that request, ultimately generating documentation again, but just in a different way, right? In a different form factor. And she's taking a sweet time. Okay, sweet. Accept this change. Now, for this last one, let's say that my team has a specific way of documenting Java. We have this markdown file where we've explicitly outlined how it's supposed to be documented, right? So what we'll do here is we'll go back and we are going to highlight this block of code. And we're going to use one of our quick commands, right? We are going to go in and we are going to say, oh, where is the Java docs? Generate documentation. Sweet. Generate docs from template. You're going to see here, this quick command tells, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go show you the quick command really quickly before I go back in there. So I have this quick command, create docs from template, that references this sheet, this markdown sheet, or tells Tabnine to reference this markdown sheet for proper docs, and then create documentations for the selected code based on the format that you're seeing in this sheet, right? So let me open this back up, create docs from template. Oops, okay. So you're going to notice that this generation of documentation is actually going to be referencing my specific markdown file and how it should be generating those docs, right? It's going to show examples. It's also going to provide a versioning, right? Same thing. You like it. It looks good. We can see the references here. Awesome. It went in and used my Java documentation guidelines markdown file. Sweet. And then I'm just going to hit apply. It's going to get thrown into my code and boom. It's exactly how I want it and exactly how my team writes it, right? So 3 different ways. You can see it does recognize, right? So it automatically knows based on my workspace being on, it's generating this documentation. But this is just a little bit more full, right? 3 different ways to generate documentation, all based on how you see fit, what feels the most comfortable to you or what your team decides to do, right? But it's that freedom and flexibility of choice, which I think is really, really powerful. So the last bit here we're going to show is maintaining before we move on to code review, right? So let me see here. Actually, before I move on to maintaining, I'm going to backtrack real quick. We talked about something, or we've been talking about privacy and security a lot. One thing I want to bring up is our provenance and attribution feature, right? I may have talked about it a little bit earlier, but it's the idea that when turned on, it's going to review any generated code by Tabnine in chat for any matches of publicly visible code on GitHub. And it will highlight any changes, or not changes, but highlight any licensing or licenses that are attached to that code, as well as direct you to the source code that that's coming from, right? So just to give the folks here on a call what that looks like, right? For example, I want to initialize an open telemetry, let's say tracer provider, and you use Go as the sample. And just on the topic, since we are talking about creating new code, and we are in chat a lot during this demo, I just want to show the folks here what that might look like, right? So we'll have to wait for it to fully generate this response. And then you'll see that there is going to be attribution attached to this code suggestion, right? So at the bottom here, you're going to say, oh man, attribution. When you click on that, it's going to show, okay, we have Apache 2.0, we have a BSD. There was, and it must have been updated since the last, a GPL 3.0, right? But that's something, for example, we know that folks usually don't want to be pulled in, right? So not only do you have this level of visibility with provenance and attribution, but we then took it a step forward. And now we're offering censorship. So let's say you didn't want to see any Apache 2.0s or any GPL 3.0s, right? You can specifically ban those licenses from being shown or censor them from being shown to any developers in your organization when they are asking for or they're prompting or writing queries and getting suggestions back. Now, we've went over creating, documenting, testing, right? Let's talk about code review, right? So sort of the next stage, right? We've made sure all of this works. We've added the proper documentation. Now we're about to push this. But before we push it, we're going to, as Maya said, we can do code review within the IDE. So let's talk about sort of what that looks like and where that's coming from first. So within Tabnine, the admin section, you're going to have a new area called coaching rules, right? Now Tabnine comes preloaded with few thousand rules that we've gathered and evaluated and analyzed from leading voices in the software development space, right? And but what we encourage is that, you know, for folks to upload their own rule set, right? We understand that every organization is unique. This isn't we're not trying to enforce a one size fits all approach, but we're giving everyone a really good foundational out of the box coaching rules to start using, right? And these are much more advanced than your basic linter, right? These aren't rigid rules, right? There's ones that are for correctness, for security, for maintainability, readability, right? A lot of things that can be subject to opinion, right? And that's the powerful part about this coaching engine, right? Is Amaya might have one way of writing Python code, and I might have another way of writing Python code. But the way that's correct is the way that Amaya writes it, or that we write it in our organization, right? And that's the level of specificity you can get down here, or the granularity you can enforce within the coaching rules, right? So to add your own rules, you can point us to a golden repo. We can analyze and extract a rule set from that, right? You can also send us just a simple Excel sheet with plain English descriptions, and we will analyze and create the rest, right? So we'll create good examples and bad examples. We'll determine severity. We'll also help create a custom rule ID, but all of which you are in control of as well. You can go back in and change, fine tune, polish how you see fit. So we understand we have this coaching rules now. We know what it consists of and how it works and how we can utilize it. Let's see it in action, right? So within our IDE, let's take, I will do this one here. Let's run our code review. So this is pre us sending this out to my code reviewer, right? And we're going to say Tabnine review repository. Did I just freeze? Okay, there we go. So you can see here, Tabnine is going to send everything that has been changed, any file that's been changed since my last commit out for code review, right? And it's going to compare these files with the rules that are in my coaching engine, right? So we'll do that, and then we'll hit tab 9, review, report, -- last. Awesome. Now what it's doing is, in this case, this is maybe do not, okay, yeah. So these are a bunch of HTTP requests. Maybe not the best example right now, but what is important is it's catching all of these, and maybe aren't the most exciting syntax ones, right? But what it is important to note is it's catching all of these violations based on my code, and it's saying, okay, here's the file in question, here's the specific line, the violation, the description, and if there was, different code. Let me see if I can get a better one here. Let me do tab 9, view repository. Sweet tab. Okay. So, for example, this password, do not use excessive if statements, right? Use switch expressions instead. It's a warning. It's not critical. But it's telling me, okay, use switch expressions instead of if statements, and it's a flag, right? And there's the rule specifically that it said that it violated, right? Now, this all gets done prior to ever going into code review, right? You can take it a step forward or a step further, and we can use terminal as context, and you can ask tab 9, help me implement the issues found in review within the terminal. And now it's going to use, terminal as context to help me implement these changes, right? So it's going to use the terminal, the code review that it found, and we're going to go through like our excessive if statements. Here's the review, here's the switch, and then we can go and apply those if we would like, right? And it's also worth mentioning that you'll see that tab 9 doesn't just provide code suggestions. It's also going to provide terminal commands. And it's as simple as just clicking run, and that will get ran in your terminal, right? So really powerful, really easy. Now, let's continue moving forward to maintain sort of the last bit here. Let's go over to, we'll go here. And we're in our app. You know what? Let's go actually back to our fraud detection dashboards. We're going to talk about maintaining, right? So most of you, I would assume, have product teams or UI teams, right, or UX teams that are helping you sort of determine the roadmap. But in addition to those folks, tab 9 can be a really, really good source of maintenance or fixes or issues, improvements, right? Ways to improve or refactor or help maintain your code, right? So let's just say here in this program, we'll reference first the dashboard.tsx, say, what are areas of improvement or optimization I can make in this? And when it comes to refactoring or modernizing code, right? This is something that Tabnine's really, really good at. So this is a very simple use case of just being able to look at, this TypeScript file and help me come up with improvements or optimizations, right? But we've refactored, let's say, old PHP code into new Java code, right? We've taken old, let's say, like Java 11 and put it to Java refactorized or modernized, excuse me, into Java 18 or Java 19, right? So it's really really capable of big lifts, right? But then again, it's the same flow. You can go in, you can apply, you can insert a cursor, you can even do a new file, right? But the apply, again, just to hone in on this, it inserts this code suggestion exactly where it should be, regardless of cursor location, regardless of open file location or open file currently on your within your IDE. So I believe that is it. I feel like I've been rambling for a good bit here, not rambling, but talking for a good bit. Happy to answer any questions or let's see here. So see some examples of custom commands. Let's start there. All right. And apologies, it looks like Amaya might have dropped off. So didn't see these questions coming in, so give me a handful here and I'll go through each of them. So let's talk about custom commands. So there's a handful. For example, one of them, creating docs. I'll show you my favorite, Ed, or my favorites. One of them is creating docs from templates, right? So referencing a specific file and then creating documentation for it, right? But we've seen folks, for example, use it for testing, right? We have, let's say there's a hardware company, they have, they produce a new piece of hardware, they have to run it through 1,000 different tests, right? Those 1,000 different tests might be outlined in a markdown file or a test file, right? And what they do is reference that test file and create a new test file for this new component using those same tests, right? It's taking a lot of, not necessarily hard work, but just monotonous, laborious work and speeding it up exponentially and doing it very, very accurately at a point that it's a very mature engineering organization is very comfortable using that, and that's what they've chosen to go forward with as their path to doing this testing. As far as other ones that I really like here, find and fix JS dependencies, right? So let's just show you this one since I have it up here. Find and fix JS dependencies. What it's going to do is it's going to analyze my POM file, not my POM file, excuse me, my package.json file, and it is going to let me know if there's anything out of date, if there's any vulnerabilities, and which updates or what updates I should apply here, right? Okay, this is awesome. Let's update next to the most stable version. Prisma. See, it's going through and it's just helping me update seemingly almost all of my dependencies. And then similarly, it's going to tell me to do an npm update in the terminal, right? And we can see what specific references. Awesome. Okay. Drill, yes, this will be available after the webcast. It's going to be accessible via LinkedIn. It will also be accessible on our YouTube. Let me see here. We often want to build something like a new API endpoint and need to pattern this after existing endpoints in a Spring Boot app. Would that be something we'd be able to add a custom command for to specifically reference files for an API when creating new ones? Yes. As said, you can do exactly that. The Jira integration is great, but our company has multiple Jira accounts, so we are unable to use this feature. Totally understandable. Not necessarily super sure on I guess it's unique to your organization, right? But just for the folks on this call, we do support Jira Cloud as well as Jira Data Center. Unsure about, again, without knowing more information, I believe that might be something that's just unique to you guys. But would encourage you to try and find a way to use it because it is so darn powerful and very, very accurate. Tab does not only support one Jira account. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Well, see here. Any more questions? Anything else that we want to see? Anything that we didn't catch on this call, or maybe you joined late that you want to see more of? It is just me right now, and we've got some time, so willing to stay on and showcase anything here that folks would like to see. Let me see in the meantime if I can find something else that might be worthwhile showing. Well, if not, if there are no further questions, we can wrap this up for now. But I do appreciate everyone being here. I appreciate the questions so far. I will say for the folks that do have Tabnine or you're getting started, or just in general, you'll notice that when I'm prompting, I'm creating new conversations each time. Just a best practice, right? As I switch my direction or my goal that I'm trying to achieve with each conversation, I start a new conversation, right? So I'm not going to talk about, let's say, making, implementing Jira tickets and from this find and fix JS dependencies. I'm going to start a new conversation, right? So every time that you shift gears, start a new conversation. But important that if you are staying on the same topic, build out that conversation, right? It's just going to add more context, give Tabnine more clarity into what you're doing, right? So similar, think of it as your brain. You wouldn't talk to one person about a million things all at once, jumping around from, back and forth and back and forth. You talk about one thing, you have that conversation, you move on to the next thing, you have that conversation. Treat Tabnine as your brain, right? Other tips and tricks here when it comes to making custom commands. I know that's something we've talked about. When you do custom commands, be specific. Be very, very specific. Use at mentions, right? Use it to reference specific files or specific classes or methods or just blocks of code. Numerate, right? Do step 1, step 2, step 3, right? All of these are things that'll help achieve better results, help get that expected outcome that I think we're hoping for. But I think we might have grounds here in the next few weeks, maybe to do some sort of prompting 101 or 201 course, right? Something that we talk a little bit about in Tabnine Office Hours on prompting best practices, right? Because that's something that, regardless of tech or innovation, prompting is not going anywhere. So I think it's important to hone in and use that as a skill, right? Not to vibe code, right? But to accurately prompt, to create good custom commands, to get the most out of Tabnine that you can. So with that being said, it was a pleasure staying on and chatting with everyone today. I appreciate everyone's attendance. I appreciate the great questions. And as always, we will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in.